"Maurice!" shouted his father below, and the becatted Maurice bounded between the knees of the creature that wore his clothes and his looks. "Coming, father," this thing called, and sped away, leaving Maurice on the servants' bed, under which Lord Hugh had taken refuge with his tin can, so short and yet so long a time ago. The stairs re-echoed to the loud boots which Maurice had never before thought loud. He had often indeed wondered that any one could object to them. He wondered now no longer. He heard the front door slam. That thing had gone to Dr. Strongitharm's. That was one comfort. Lord Hugh was a boy now. He would know what it was to be a boy. He, Maurice, was a cat, and he meant to taste fully all catty pleasures, from milk to mice. Meanwhile he was without mice or milk, and, unaccustomed as he was to a tail, he could not but feel that all was not right with his own. There was a feeling of weight, a feeling of discomfort, of positive terror. If he should move, what would that thing that was tied to his tail do? Rattle, of course. Oh, but he could not bear it if that thing rattled. Nonsense! It was only a sardine tin. Yes, Maurice knew that. But all the same, if it did rattle. He moved his tail the least little soft inch. No sound. Perhaps really there wasn't anything tied to his tail. But he couldn't be sure unless he moved. But if he moved the thing would rattle, and if it rattled Maurice felt sure that he would expire or go mad. A mad cat! What a dreadful thing to be! Yet he couldn't sit on that bed for ever, waiting, waiting, waiting for the dreadful thing to happen. Oh dear! sighed Maurice the cat. I never knew what people meant by afraid before. His cat heart was beating heavily against his furry side. His limbs were getting cramped. He must move. He did. And instantly the awful thing happened. The sardine tin touched the iron of the bed foot. It rattled. "Oh, I can't bear it, I can't!" cried poor Maurice, in a heart-rending meow that echoed through the house. He leapt from the bed and tore through the door and down the stairs, and behind him came the most terrible thing in the world. People might call it a sardine tin, but he knew better. It was the soul of all the fear that ever had been or ever could be. It rattled. Maurice, who was a cat, flew down the stairs. Down, down, the rattling horror followed. Oh, horrible! Down, down. At the foot of the stairs the horror, caught by something, a banister, a stair rod, stopped. The string on Maurice's tail tightened. His tail was jerked. He was stopped. But the noise had stopped too. Maurice lay, only just alive, at the foot of the stairs. It was Mabel who untied the string and soothed his terrors with strokings and tender love words. Maurice was surprised to find what a nice little girl his sister really was. "I'll never tease you again," he tried to say softly. But that was not what he said. What he said was, "Dear Pussy, nice poor Pussy then," said Mabel, and she hid away the sardine tin and did not tell any one. This seemed unjust to Maurice, until he remembered that, of course, Mabel thought that he was really Lord Hugh, and that the person who had tied the tin to his tail was her brother Maurice. Then he was half grateful. She carried him down in soft, safe arms to the kitchen, and asked cook to give him some milk. "Tell me to change back into Maurice," said Maurice, who was quite worn out by his cattish experiences. But no one heard him. What they heard was "Meow, meow, meow." Then Maurice saw how he had been tricked. He could be changed back into a boy as soon as any one said to him, "Leave off being a cat and be Maurice again." But his tongue had no longer the power to ask any one to say it. He did not sleep well that night. For one thing, he was not accustomed to sleeping on the kitchen hearthrug, and the black beetles were too many and too cordial. He was glad when cook came down and turned him out into the garden, where the October frost still lay white on the yellowed stalks of sunflowers and nasturtiums. He took a walk, climbed a tree, failed to catch a bird, and felt better. He began also to feel hungry. A delicious scent came stealing out of the back kitchen door. Oh, joy! There were to be herrings for breakfast. Maurice hastened in and took his place on his usual chair. His mother said, "Down, Puss," and gently tilted the chair so that Maurice fell off it. Then the family had herrings. Maurice said, "You might give me some," and he said it so often that his father, who of course heard only mewings, said, "For goodness' sake, put that cat out of the room." Maurice breakfasted later, in the dustbin, on herring heads. But he kept himself up with a new and splendid idea. They would give him milk presently, and then they should see. He spent the afternoon sitting on the sofa in the dining room, listening to the conversation of his father and mother. It is said that listeners never hear any good of themselves. Maurice heard so much that he was surprised and humbled. He heard his father say that he was a fine, plucky little chap, but he needed a severe lesson, and Dr. Strongitharm was the man to give it to him. He heard his mother say things that made his heart throb in his throat, and the tears prick behind those green cat eyes of his. He had always thought his parents a little bit unjust. Now they did him so much more than justice that he felt quite small and mean inside his cat skin. "He's a dear, good, affectionate boy," said mother. "It's only his high spirits. Don't you think, darling, perhaps you were a little hard on him?" "It was for his own good," said father. "Of course," said mother, "but I can't bear to think of him at that dreadful school." "Well," father was beginning, when Jane came in with the tea things on a clattering tray, whose sound made Maurice tremble in every leg. Father and mother began to talk about the weather. Maurice felt very affectionately to both his parents. The natural way of showing this was to jump on to the sideboard and thence on to his father's shoulders. He landed there on his 4 padded feet, light as a feather, but father was not pleased. "Bother the cat!" he cried. "Jane, put it out of the room." Maurice was put out. His great idea, which was to be carried out with milk, would certainly not be carried out in the dining room. He sought the kitchen, and seeing a milk can on the window ledge, jumped up beside the can and patted it as he had seen Lord Hugh do. "My!" said a friend of Jane's who happened to be there, "ain't that cat clever? A perfect moral, I call her." "He's nothing to boast of this time," said cook. "I will say for Lord Hugh, he's not often taken in with an empty can." This was naturally mortifying for Maurice, but he pretended not to hear, and jumped from the window to the tea table and patted the milk jug.